All right, let's dive in. Noah's Ark, right? A story we all think we know, but wow, the sources you guys sent over, this is a whole new level. We're going deep on this one beyond the kids' version, and trust me, this gets fascinating.
What's always struck me is how we hear the Noah's Ark story, but we don't always think about the context. Like, imagine no one's ever seen a flood like that before, no weather reports.
Does.
Noah gets this message from God, and it must have sounded, well, pretty crazy to everyone around him.
Right. If my neighbor told me, hey, building a giant boat got to fit every animal, God told me there's a flood coming, I'd be like, maybe we should have a little chat with a professional. So, how does this whole radical faith thing work when no one even has the concept of a worldwide disaster?
That's the thing. One source pointed out that Noah's world probably saw things in cycles, right? Seasons, crops, life, and death. But a flood that covers the entire earth, that was unthinkable. So Noah obeying God, it wasn't just following instructions, it was believing in something totally outside of human experience.
So, not just faith, but faith when everyone else probably thought he'd lost it. That's next level. And this source actually uses the term epistemological break. Like, Noah had to believe in a reality no one else could even grasp.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes his obedience even more powerful. He doesn't just pray about it, he starts building, step by step, this ark. Probably took years, all while everyone's doubting him. I mean, what does that say about faith not being passive? It's about doing something even when the why seems impossible.
It's like that saying, leap in the net will appear, but on a gigantic scale. And it really makes you think, what impossible things are we facing where we need that same kind of trust? Are we willing to take those first steps, even when we don't see the whole staircase?
That's a good question for all of us, isn't it? What are those arcs in our lives that seem overwhelming? Are we letting fear freeze us up? Or are we taking those small steps, plank by plank, towards what we believe in?
Okay, but here's where it gets heavy. Noah wasn't just saving himself, he had his whole family. Imagine that responsibility, not just your own soul, but everyone you love depending on what you do.
It really makes you think about leadership differently, yeah. One source digs into this, the difference between just personal salvation and being responsible for guiding others. Are we creating that space of faith and preparation for our families, our communities? Or are we leaving them vulnerable to those, metaphorical storms of life?
And that metaphorical storm idea, that's key. This isn't just about religion, it's about facing any hardship. One source even listed practical examples: money problems, relationships falling apart, health crises. They called it building your own arc of preparedness.
And that's where that ARC plan activity from the source comes in. Not literally building a boat, but figuring out what areas in your life you need to be proactive, not reactive. Like what potential storms are on your horizon? What can you do now to build that resilience?
So it's like, before the rain hits, are you financially stable? Got a good support system? Invested in your health? This is actually making me think about my own ARC plan and what I need to focus on.
And that's what's so great about this deep dive, getting us to think about these things. Remember, Noah built the ark before it rained, not reacting to a disaster. He was preparing for it. That's some serious foresight and a level of trust, well, we could all learn from.
And can you imagine years of everyone thinking you're crazy while you build this massive boat? That must have taken some serious mental strength.
Right. That's a part of the story we often miss. Sometimes, real faith, real obedience, it means standing out even when it's uncomfortable.
You know, there's that quote, the opposite of courage isn't cowardice, it's conformity. And Noah was definitely not conforming. But gotta admit, when I first saw that ARC plan activity, I thought, oh, great, another self-help worksheet. Now, seeing it through Noah's story, it's actually making sense.
It's fascinating how it encourages you to really look at your own life, right? What are your specific areas where you need to build your own metaphorical arc? Not one size fits all, but a way to personalize that preparedness.
And it's not just vague advice. The source gave real examples. Setting financial goals, making time for family, even strengthening your spiritual connection through prayer, meditation, stuff like that.
It's all about those small, consistent actions. Those are what build a strong foundation. Just like Noah, one plank, one animal at a time.
Speaking of the animals, have you ever thought about how they all fit on the ark? Did Noah have some ancient animal management system or something?
Now, that's where the story enters the realm of faith and miracles, right? We talk about the ark's size, the practicality, but ultimately it points to something beyond what humans can do. It's about trusting that when God gives a command, He provides the way to make it happen.
That's a good point. Maybe it's less about figuring out how and more about understanding why. Noah obeyed because he trusted God, even when it didn't make logical sense.
And isn't that the core of faith? Taking that leap, trusting that even when we can't see the whole staircase, God will guide our steps.
We always think of Noah's Ark as a children's story, but what we're talking about here, this is deep stuff. Radical faith, leadership, building resilience for whatever storms life throws at us.
And we've only just begun. There's so much more to explore, especially when we think about the covenant God made with Noah and what it means for us today.
You know, when you think about Noah's Ark, what always pops into my head is that dove coming back with the olive branch, hope after the storm.
Ah, yes, the rainbow. Such a powerful image, and it goes beyond cultures, beyond time. But we forget sometimes the rainbow wasn't just a pretty sight. It meant something much deeper. It was a covenant, a promise between God and all of humanity.
So it's more than just, hey, the flood's over, we good now.
Exactly. One source described it as God saying, I'm never going to destroy the earth with a flood again. This is a fresh start, like hitting the reset button for everyone.
Don't we all wish we had one of those sometimes? But, what's this ancient promise got to do with us today? I mean, we're not exactly building arks out in the backyard.
Great question. And that's what I love about this source, and it addresses that directly. The covenant with Noah, it goes beyond the literal flood, see? It's about this deeper truth, God's love and commitment to us, to humanity. Even when we face tough times, even when we screw up, God's grace is there. It's always available.
Okay, now I'm seeing how this old story connects to us now. So, like, the rainbow meant a new beginning for Noah and his family, and we can tap into that same hope when we go through stuff.
Absolutely. It reminds us that no matter how hard things get, God's always with us, offering a path forward, a way to heal, to start over.
So it's like our own little ark reminder, the rainbow. Like, hey, God's got us covered no matter what.
You got it. And it's not just surviving the storm. It's about coming out the other side, changed, better, ready for what's next.
It's funny how we think of Noah's Ark as a kid's story, but the things we're talking about, faith, leadership, bouncing back grace, that stuff means more as adults when life gets complicated.
You're so right. And the source makes that point too, how these lessons, they become even more important as we get older and face those inevitable storms.
It's like those picture books you read as a kid, then you pick them up years later and it's like, whoa, there was a whole other level I missed.
Exactly. And it's like we were saying earlier with the ARC plan activity, those simple things done consistently over time, they build that foundation, like strengthening our spiritual connection, taking care of our relationships, making smart financial decisions.
It's one of the big takeaways from Noah, isn't it? Even when things seem impossible, we can't see the whole picture. We got to trust God's got a plan. He's guiding us even when we can't see it.
That's it. Faith and action working together. We're not just sitting around waiting. We're making choices that reflect our beliefs.
Yeah.
Trusting God leading us even if we don't know every step.
It's interesting, the different arcs we built throughout life, right? It's not a one-time deal. It's always adapting, changing as we face new stuff.
It's an ongoing process for sure. Like Noah's journey didn't stop when the water went down. Our own journeys of faith, they keep going. There's always going to be new challenges, new storms, new arcs to build.
And hopefully a few rainbows along the way to remind us of God's promises.
Absolutely. And just like the rainbow came after the storm, those times when we grow the most, they often come after the tough stuff, the challenges.
So those difficult times, the storms, they're actually opportunities to build our arcs stronger and rely more on God.
That's it. It's about embracing the whole journey, the good and the bad, knowing we're never alone. We've got Noah's story, God's promise, and the power of faith to push us forward.
We've covered so much today, from radical faith to those metaphorical arcs to God's covenant.
And we could easily spend another hour on this story, but we want to leave you with something to think about.
Because what's a deep dive without a little homework?
Right, so here's a question to reflect on. What storm are you facing right now? And what practical steps can you take today to build that arc, to be ready, to be resilient?
It doesn't have to be some big dramatic thing. Could be as simple as taking a few minutes to pray or calling a friend for support. Remember, like Noah, it's those small, consistent things that add up over time.
And as you start building your own arc, remember what we learned from Noah. Have faith, even when it feels impossible. Follow God's leading, even if it doesn't make sense. Lead with courage and compassion, especially for those you're responsible for. And most importantly, trust God's grace. knowing he's always there guiding you, and there's a rainbow of hope waiting after every storm.
Powerful stuff. Really ties everything together, doesn't it?
It does. And reminds us that this Noah's Ark story, yeah, it might seem old, but the lessons, they're timeless. They apply to us right now.
Before we move on, there's one more part of the story that we should talk about.
What's that?
We've talked about faith, resilience, the hope of the rainbow, but what about the flood itself? The judgment part, the consequences of what people were doing.
That's a great point. Easy to focus on the happy ending and forget the destruction that came before.
Exactly. So before we wrap up, let's dive into that final layer of the Noah's Ark story. So we've been through a lot with this Noah's Ark story, huh? The faith, the resilience, that fresh start feeling with the rainbow. But there's this part, this flood itself, that's always kind of, I don't know, hard to swallow. It's not just rain, it's like divine judgment, right?
Yeah, one source put it like this. It was the consequence of how wicked humanity had become, turning away from God. It makes you think actions have consequences, and sometimes they're huge.
Honestly, that always bugged me as a kid. Like, if God's all loving, why wipe out practically everyone? Seems a bit harsh.
People have been asking that question forever, and there's lots of ways to look at it. This source, though, emphasized that God's justice and mercy, they can exist together. It's not one or the other.
So, not just God got mad, sent a flood, end of story.
Right. The flood, they said, was both a judgment on the bad stuff happening and a mercy, because it allowed for a do-over. By saving Noah and his family, humanity got a second chance, a shot at doing things better.
Like a reset, but with a really big price tag. Makes you think about holding people accountable, but also giving them a chance to redeem themselves.
And even in that judgment, God made a way out. Noah got those instructions, how to build the ark so they'd survive. Not just punishment, but a test of faith, showing God's grace.
They actually compared it to a parent disciplining a kid, you know? It's out of love to guide him in the right direction, even if it means tough consequences.
That's a good way to put it. God's love isn't just warm fuzzies, it's setting boundaries too, letting us see what happens when we make certain choices.
So, okay, judgment and mercy, what's that got to do with us now? No giant floods on the horizon, right?
No? But the idea is still important. Our
So,
choices matter, good or bad. And when we mess up, even when we face those consequences, God's grace is still there. Forgiveness and a chance to make things right, it's always there.
like that saying, God judges our sin, but he loves the sinner.
Exactly. That love is what makes him offer us a way back, to learn from our mistakes and grow, just like he did with Noah.
So even though the flood was devastating, in the end, it led to something new, something hopeful. Even the darkest times, there can be new beginnings.
And that's a great note to end our deep dive on, I think. We started with radical faith, then leadership challenges, practical steps for building resilience, God's covenant, and even this tough stuff, judgment and grace. You really covered it all.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? But like any good deep dive, it's just the start. We unpacked these sources, but now it's about you, what you do with these insights, how you apply them in your own life.
And remember, you're not alone in that. You've got Noah's story, the strength you get from faith, and the hope of new beginnings. Take those with you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope it got you thinking, maybe even challenged you a bit. That's what it's all about.
Keep those questions coming. Keep searching for understanding and keep building that arc of yours so you're ready for anything.
Until next time, keep diving deep.